This time on Growing Up Punk, we got ourselves another interview. Hey, welcome to Growing Up Punk, the podcast about punk rock and all of its friends. This time around, Aaron's got another interview, this time with a guy by the name of Jon Ladd. You may recognize him, be familiar with him from such bands as 710 Split, as well as Courage Dear Heart. So we're going to get to that in just a moment, but real quick, off the top here, I'm just going to give you, those important things, the social networking stuff. You can find us basically anywhere. We're on Facebook. Just look up Growing Up Punk. On Twitter and Instagram as well. Twitter is at Growing Punk Pod, and Instagram is at Growing Up Punk. You can follow myself on Twitter and Instagram at David Growing Up, and Aaron, whom you're going to hear in a moment here. You can find him on Instagram at Aaron Grew Up Punk. Wherever you're listening to the show, I mean, this may be your first time, and I'm asking you to rate and review it, and you haven't even heard the episode yet, but you know the business. You can find us wherever you can find podcasts. Rate and review. And for our regular episodes, this is kind of a new thing. I'll get this out of the way real quick. You can find us on YouTube, but the regular episodes will be lacking the music from these artists that we are talking about or talking to. So if you want to hear the full experience, make sure you're listening to us on your favorite podcast app. Anyway, without further ado, this is Aaron, my buddy Aaron, from Growing Up Punk, right here chatting with Jon Ladd from 710 Split and Courage Dear Heart.
Yeah, so why don't you kind of start with just kind of walking us through, kind of how you got into music. How old were you? Maybe what were some of the really influential things going on in your life, and what were some of the bands that kind of first grabbed your attention?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, man, it's crazy. There's, we all, it's funny when you hear these stories because certain people, it's funny, some people get into music like way earlier than some others. Like I've had friends that were like, oh yeah, I was choosing my favorite bands in third grade and whatnot. And for some reason, I remember being more drawn to it around that middle school time, like sixth grade or so, seventh grade or something like that. Yeah. And we grew up in the, I grew up in the church scene down here, but back in the day, where it seemed like there was always like Christian versions of, the bands that all my friends liked, and we went to a pretty strict church that would, would really push only Christian music alone. So I heard from kids at school, they're like, oh, you gotta check out this band. I do my best, that I could go find the Christian alternative. So my mom would let me, listen to them. Yeah. So maybe in sixth grade, it was interesting. There was two bands that I remember finding off the top of my head. One of them was Petra, if you remember them back in the day. Oh man, love it. Yeah. And then there was another band called One Bad Pig. Yeah. And they were leaning in, back then they were leaning into the skate thrash scene, maybe skate punk scene, a little bit more like that early 90s version of it. Yeah. So it was coming out of like some of the like thrash scene, not quite like melodic punk stuff. And then so I got into them and I thought they were awesome because they were real cartoony. All their shirts had like, this like crazy looking pig busting through stained glass windows and stuff like that on a skateboard, So it always seemed like a band that like the school bus driver on The Simpsons would listen to, that kind of band. Oh, yeah, so, but I remember liking both those bands, but for some reason, like One Bad Pig's, like the way they were presenting themselves, like kind of related to that. It was a little more fun. You know what I mean? Right. So I really like that. And then through getting a little older and whatnot, I remember getting eventually into, I guess, jumping up into high school time, eventually hearing about, I don't remember the first time I actually heard about it was MXPX was that blue, the very first one.
Poking at ya. Yeah.
Right. And so I remember people being like, oh yeah, check this out in the Christian scene. At that time, for me, Tooth and Nail was actually like not really doing the Christian version of these other bands. I felt there was a lot of unique stuff. There was a lot of non-Christian kids getting into, stuff on Tooth and Nail and Solid State because they were respecting it as like, a different kind, like a unique feeling and sound. So then back in the day, it felt like they were finding bands, like organically, and not just finding the manufactured versions of Christian manufactured versions of non-Christian bands.
Right.
Maybe that story changed for that label later, but I'm just saying at the beginning, I remember feeling it was very unique kind of feeling.
Yeah.
And so much so, I remember in my 12th grade, my senior year, I went and bought the, I think it was the Poconacha CD, or maybe at that point it was the one after that, which would have been Teenage Politics.
Right.
One of those two I remember having at my desk at my school, and I went to a Christian school. It was actually an independent Baptist church, not Southern Baptist. It was even like more strict than that. So it was independent Baptist. Like it was too much for the Southern Baptists. So they went independent. So the teacher came by my desk and saw me like looking at the album artwork, and she took it away.
Nice.
And she was like, you can't have the non-Christian music at school. And I was like, well, but wait, that's MXPX. I swear they're Christian kids, I think, from what I know.
Yeah.
Anyways, at the end of school, she came back to me that day and she gave it to me. She goes, I read some of their lyrics and they seem fine. I just wish they didn't look so worldly. That's what she told me.
Oh, man.
So I was like, and then I asked her, I was just being a little bit of a jerk. I asked her, I said, but isn't the most worldly thing you could wear would be like a suit and tie? Because that's what most people are wearing when they're committing certain atrocities.
Right.
And she was like, I think I got detention. I don't remember what happened, but she didn't. It was just a question, but she got mad that I asked the question.
Yeah. Man, it's so classic. We've heard that similar story so many times. And I remember being at a store and wanting to get Teenage Politics and my mom looking at the cover, and just based off of that, which is like, it's not like it's offensive in any way, but for whatever reason, that character, she was like, maybe not that one. So I waited a few years and got it anyways, but.
Yeah, it's, not to jump too far ahead, but actually the business I own now, it's called Terminus Teas. One of our like mascot is this crazy looking peach guy because we're from Georgia. And so that's like the state fruit, or at least I think it is. Anyway, our character has that, it doesn't look just like him, but it's got like one big eye, one small eye,
cool.
kind of crooked smile. So it's kind of like there's some influence there,
yeah.
even on our like logo. But I guess to rewind back, also when I was in that senior year, it was like coming out of a lot of the bands sounding very, it was the midnight. I graduated in '96. I'm a little older than maybe some people are listening to this, but '96 there was this kind of phasing out of your grunge scene a little bit, where, but into like Green Day had came out in like 94. So then the Offspring was coming out around that time, and like the more faster stuff. So you were actually listening to slightly faster stuff that was punk sounding and then I remember listening to Out Come the Wolves. One of the songs, what was it? Was it Ruby Soho or something like that, was on the radio. So you see what I'm saying? So there was these little hits of like punk rock kind of creeping into like somewhat of the mainstream at that point.
Oh, yeah.
And so the first band we were starting that eventually turned into the 7-10 Split was that same school. They wanted us to have like a worship band, and we were like, please, can we play? Yeah, that's fine. But then we would get together and play, and they were like, it's just too much. You can't do this. So we just, you can't, like, they didn't like the drums and the electric guitars and all that kind of stuff. So we just kept playing together anyway. And then when high school was over, a couple guys went away, a couple guys came in. So it ended up being 3 of us. And shortly after that, just kind of goof around with some of us went to college trying to figure out what's going on. We made like a little demo tape and sent it off to Screaming Giant Records, and they like called us and pretty much signed us over the phone. I mean, so, they were just looking for that kind of, we were doing, melodic punk, but also having a little bit of an edge to it, a little hardcore, little hardcore edge to it as well. We're kind of in both, because we all liked it all. So we were just like, let's just play what we want to play. So we never really cared about like, what if the hardcore kids don't like the punk stuff, what the punk kid doesn't like the hardcore stuff.
Right.
nowadays there's bands like, Day to Remember and 4 Year Strong and those bands. I'm like, well, see, so it's not so bad. People are doing it. So, so that's how it all came about. We was a bunch of friends playing together. I remember in high school when getting Punk and Drublick and showing the drummer, he didn't know how to play fast at that time. EC is his name. And then I remember one day going to practice, he's like, I figured it out, man. And he's like, showed us, he was like, we were sitting there and he started just playing so fast. And we were like, and then we just started playing and we were like, that was it. That's what I knew.
Oh,
like,
man, I love that.
He was like, yeah, it's because he does like that triple hit thing with 1 foot,
Right.
And I was like, oh my God, you're doing it. And it just, we started writing music like crazy. It was like pretty addictive at that point, you know what I mean? To just make music in your mom's basement. And then a couple years later, turn around and see kids singing those same songs you wrote in your mom's basement. It was just like super fulfilling.
Yeah. So was your mom, did she become more okay with that kind of music, but kind of as time went on, or how did that transition?
I go back and look at it, and I think some of the restrictions they were kind of like, putting on us kind of thing at the time. I look back, all of our parents did, hopefully most of our parents did the best they could. Yeah. And I look back and so I'm not bitter about any of that stuff. I know they're all just trying to figure out how to take care of, be safe and all that kind of stuff. And I think they saw that I was not waiting, not trying to, like I was out there trying to figure out, how to get a group of people together, obviously write songs, record these songs, doing it. I was so just driven into it.
Yeah.
I remember my dad pulling me aside and he's like, if you're going to do a band and not finish college and just do that kind of stuff and just be the best punk band you can be in, just be the best.
That's really cool.
And yeah, so there was total, everybody else's parents were totally, supportive too, especially after the guy who was on the Screaming Giant recordings a little bit later, his parents did put a little more pressure, I think, on him, or maybe he did that himself. I can't really remember, but he felt like he needed to finish college stuff. Me and the drummer, and then 2 other friends joined in the band. So then we became a 4-piece, and then we were on New School Records after that. And that's when the sound really, I think, matured and became what there's kind of two major phases of Seven Disc Split. There's a Screaming Giant phase, and there was the one that we were on the non-Christian label. But that's when everything really started to get, really started happening. Because that's when we were on like the Warped Tour scenes, and we got to go out and tour with so many big bands at that time. So it was just like it really started taking off at that point.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I just want to kind of just pull it back a bit to, that's really interesting just about that upbringing story, because mine is so similar to that. I totally agree that when my parents realized that, okay, maybe they don't understand, this phase or whatever you want to call it that I was in, but when they saw that, I was putting good effort into it, I was using skills that I had and being creative and, spending time with friends and building relationships, and I think they kind of figured out like, okay, this, maybe I don't know what this is all about, but this seems to be a good fit for our son. And so that's, like you said, they were all trying to do their best, and they had no context, right? It's not like they could Google, MXPX lyrics or whatever and get any kind of insight to that. So,
right, yeah. And I can look back and see where at least some roots of what I was doing in the band, like they're just the mindset of like organizing and just certain little skills in there. What I do today, how like that was like part of like similar to I don't know if I would call it a college experience, but you know what I mean? It's life experience, or and I definitely learned some values back then that there was that helped me develop and create my company that I created now.
Yeah. Was there a band that you saw live back then that was there a band that you had seen live that made you kind of want to start a band, or how did you know that was even a thing, kind of besides just playing with your friends?
Well, first of all, before seeing like a professional band, I remember being in 7th grade and I went to, they just had a talent show, and 2 kids, like a drummer and a guitar player, just played like, a Metallica song. And they were near the end of the talent show. And And by the way, this is when I was not, a very short time, I was not in a Christian school. So I got exposed to a little more, that kind of stuff then.
Yeah.
Just very few years, my parents tried out, not going to Christian school. Anyways, I'm at that talent show and they didn't last. They had them play last because I guess they didn't know how the people would react to it. Sure enough, I don't know what happened, but kids started moshing, and I'd never seen that before in seventh grade. And they kept playing. And then they turned off the sound, but the drummer kept playing, and the kids kept going. Awesome. And then eventually, parents were all running down there and teachers. And I didn't do that, but I sat back. I was in one of the seats in the stand, watching that go down. And I'm like, I want to cause people to react. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's awesome. I loved it. I loved that those kids had the guts to do that in seventh grade and keep playing and not just stop. You felt like that was their one time they could just be rebellious or something through music, I guess. I don't know what it was. I just liked that they were playing music that caused people to move and lose their mind. At least that's the way that's the way I remember it. Yeah. And then they opened up a venue. I don't know if you remember. Do you remember with Squad 5-0 and Spud Gun and all those guys? They were on a record label called
Bulletproof.
Bulletproof. The guys who started Bulletproof started a venue first in our town. Okay. They were from our town. And so I went there, and it was who was it? It was Plank Eye was playing one night in front of literally 18 people. And it was on a weeknight, and I was like, please, can I go see this band? Whatever. And I think now that I can remember, I remember them saying that they were on Tooth and Nail Records. And then I looked into Tooth and Nail, and that's how I found MXPX.
Oh, okay.
But yeah. And then, so they moved that venue down the street, the same guys. And then every weekend it felt like I felt like I saw MXPX play there 4 times in 1 year. Because they were way back in the day, around the Teenage Politics time, they were just touring. They were nonstop on the road. Yeah. You know what I mean? Just driving around. So Atlanta's ties the whole South together. So if they're going to go pretty much anywhere around there, you're going to run through there. So they would just keep playing. We just saw them 3 months ago, and they come back again. And they would bring Value Pack with them one time, and Slick Shoes another, and 90 Pound was another time. So, so it's just immediately being exposed to all those bands. Well, before we were on Screaming Giant Records, of course, I was like, man, can I get on Bulletproof? And they would always let us, we were always playing those shows, so they let us open for some of those bands. So that's kind of how, in the Atlanta scene, how we got pretty well known. Yeah. But our first non-Christian show ever, my favorite band ever is Strung Out, and they're on Fat Records, if you know that. One of my favorites. I love them. Yeah. And so I went down to the venue where they were going to play. I heard they were playing at this venue, a 700-person venue. And I talked to the person there. I was like, look, I didn't have a tape. I didn't have any kind of demo. I didn't have any way for them to hear us. But I said, look, this is my favorite band of all time. Whatever. Have you guys ever played some shows? Yeah, we played the people from, Bulletproof Records shows. But they knew that was a Christian club. You know what I mean? So they were like, well, look, we get a bunch of those kids to come down here. You put out some flyers. Yeah, no problem. Okay, we'll be here this time on that day, whatever. And they didn't even hear our band. They just said, yeah, you could open for Strung Out. So our first I don't want to say real show. That sounds like our first Atlanta show where the Atlanta kids really got to hear us, and it was the non-Christian scene, was opening for my favorite band of all time, which is Strung Out. Yeah, so that crazy. Was yeah. And so all those things kind of just kept coming together, and we just kind of kept growing and growing from all that, and I just always had a drive to always be calling these clubs, be like, we want to open for them, or what can we do? I just would find that fine line between pestering them and being proactive,
Yeah. So you were kind of the guy in the band that was just kind of all in, or were the rest of the guys like that as well? Or you were kind of the head of that?
Yeah. Well, again, there's certain skills that helps with, where I am now. So in other words, I learned that just because someone's not as passionate someone might be more introvert, where I might be extrovertly passionate. In other words, they might be all in a different way, or a different feeling. In other words, some of the guys, while I'm sitting here booking shows and doing all the business in, they're tearing out all the seats in the van, bolting couches down, building a queen size loft, So their version was, getting the van ready for like being on the road for we were on the road, I don't say 6 years straight, but one year we were out for about 9 months collectively. Because, you start in Atlanta, go up to New York, come back down, take about a week off, and then do these loops. Right. So all together in 1 year, we were gone for like 9 months out of the year. So, so some of the guys would do that. One of my really good friends, he actually works here at Terminus with me now, John Walker, who's the other guitarist in the band. He was excellent. He was excellent at really just connecting with people. I'm always good. I'm good with connecting with all kinds of people, but I'm talking more business. He would be back when, God, even before Facebook, I mean, there's all these different kind of like sprouting kind of social media stuff. So he's always emailing people and going on forums and talking to them about our band. So he was like the digital version of what I was doing in real life. Yeah. So we all had our little parts that meant that we were all in. So I would never go back and say I was more than somebody else, because you don't know where their mind's at,
Yeah, and I didn't mean necessarily more, but just I hear it lots with bands that, one guy is kind of, the go-to for all the social stuff, and the rest, they just kind of want to play. They don't necessarily care about,
right.
like the hustle part of it. But so I'm just always intrigued to kind of hear, the stories of those that going and knocking on doors and just making it happen, because that's how it was back then. Like you said, there's no social media. You want to get on a show, you go and show up and say, hey, this is who I am. And right. So that's, I just love that era, and just hearing kind of how bands made that happen. So, but could you kind of like, starting from when you signed with Screaming Giant, like what age were you guys then?
Let's see, we would have been, that was 1996. No, I'm sorry. I graduated in 96. I'm sorry. In 99 is when we signed with them. And the album Trial by Stone came out right at the end. They were almost leading into 2000. And then later 2000, an EP on Screaming Giant came out. And then right after the EP came out, Dan left the band. And then 2 years later, we signed with New School Records. So then we had 2 full lengths come out on New School Records.
So you guys were all out of high school when you started touring full time?
Yes, everybody is. Yes, everyone but myself. I graduated in 96, and everybody else graduated in 98. So they were all 19 years old, and I was 21 when we started. Something like that. And then, and then by the time John and Aaron were in the band, I would have been like 23 or so, and everybody was 21 or so at the time when we were on New School Records. So it's something in that range, right out of high school up to like 23 years old, is how old I was. So when we were getting serious.
And how did that transition from Screaming Giant to New School go? What was going on with that?
Yeah, some of it I don't really understand the back end of what happened. It was just kind of one of those phone calls where everybody's released out of their record contract. And big of a record contract. I think we had to do like one more, maybe 2 albums. I don't really know, but they were just like, they're the guy who owned Screaming Giant Records. He also owned a landscaping company, and he was having some problems. He also owned the TV show G-Rock. Oh yeah, if you remember that show back in the day. Yeah, so we got exposure just for being on the label TV wise all the time. So that was good. But then I don't know if it had something to do with TBN not wanting to do G-Rock anymore. I don't really remember the exact, this is why it's stopping. But so it was just kind of like, okay, well, that's fine. And then we actually did put out another EP in between, and we called it the Indie EP. And that was just, a couple songs we went in to record that we were working on, and we toured just moving around. So still your Screaming Giant fans were coming around, and we went to Oregon to go play. We were on a compilation that we were asked to be on New School Records, and we were coming through, and he booked us a show, and we hung out with him, and he was like, why don't we just sign you guys? And we were the next ones they signed on New School. So
Did you guys ever have thoughts of, like you'd mentioned, seeing Tooth and Nail bands? Like, had you guys tried getting on Tooth and Nail, or was there any kind of movement in that?
There was by that time we had toured with so many different tooth and nail bands and had done that we were, I don't know what it was too, is if I was just trying to be positive all the time. I mean, I tried to do my best, but sometimes people would be negative. You always hear people be negative about some record label they were on,
Yeah.
I don't know. I never had this expectation, because I think there's a big difference between goals and expectations. My idea was always on progression and growth.
Yeah.
And I've also found out, and also learned this in business, is that you're not, if you try to duplicate someone else's path, it doesn't necessarily always work out. It actually often doesn't work out.
Yeah, for
it's
sure.
just because there's just too many different variables and whatnot. And we got to the point through New School Records where we started doing showcases for like Island Records. Our friends, we played with like Thrice, and they got to Island, and we've been on tour with like Yellow Card got signed to Lobster Records, then went to like the Capitol Records or something like that after that. So all these bands that they were moving to something even more than that. So we would just go do these like label showcases sometimes, and we would just keep playing and just kind of not be. We were never really afraid of like, are we doing the right thing? I don't remember anyone ever being like, if we don't get on this label or this label, what does it mean? We just kept growing and meeting people and really focused on friendships we were making on the road. And we, I don't know if you knew this, but we actually recently released 2 new songs.
I saw that.
Yeah. The first one's, it's called The Messenger Has Fallen. And that one is actually about what I just talked about really noticing is, just the friend, missing hanging out with people, and the amount of times we stayed up way too late and barely felt, alive to drive the next day to the next show because we were having so much fun hanging out after the shows with people. So I love doing the shows, but I think hanging out with the people was just as much gratifying as well.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you guys had a pretty good setup, just like relationship wise. You hear so many times of bands that, they spend months and months on end in a van together, and, they end up breaking up just because they can't stand each other. So what was it about you guys that, you could just work so hard and spend so much time together and tour so much and still succeed at that?
I think it was that we were such good friends and just understood each other's humor. I think there's that level of we were just worked so well together. Maybe a part of that was just the way it all came together. The other part of it is, I think one of my, I guess, I don't know if you call it talent or skills here is to really, I'm more into marketing. That's what I really do. So I'm really always very attentive and do my best to understand people and communicate with them the best I can on their level. So I knew very well how to have the same conversation with all the different guys in the band, and really make it so we're on the same page or like just talking and having a good time. Even if somebody is having a rough day and being a little grumpy or whatever, we would figure ways to goof around and bring them out of it, or just let them sleep it off, just they'd be fine in a couple hours after they get some rest, So all of our parents had the same mentality as my dad. That's another thing to say too. Nobody was ever, no one was ever feeling the pressure of like, my mom and dad don't want me to do this anymore. And then when things started getting serious with certain people with girlfriends, I was the first one to get married, and I still toured years after being married, and never once did my wife put pressure that maybe I shouldn't be touring. So I've always either A, communicated with people very clearly about what I wanted to do and my intent, and B, they believed that too, and they wanted the best for what I wanted to do. So I just surrounded myself with people like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's such a huge part of it, right? When you have a good support system and it helps you get through those, those tough stretches. Yeah, I'd love to hear about what some of those standout tours were from back then. Like you mentioned, you played with lots of tooth and nail bands, and even like bands like Thrice and Yellow Card.
Yeah, the Huntingtons actually were my favorite. All of our favorites. Like I could speak for everybody in the band. We did so many tours with the Huntingtons where we probably business-wise, both their band and our band probably should have been doing a tour together and go do something else for a minute. Maybe eventually do another tour together kind of thing. Yeah. But we did like 4 or 5 tours together, some of them back to back. It got to the point where some people in our hometown thought they were from Georgia, you know, like no, they're from like Delaware and like, you know, Philadelphia and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So they just became such best friends with us. Same with Sidewalk Slam that became Run Kid Run.
Yeah.
We all three of us would tour a lot together. Those three, the whole group of people. So I think maybe those shows were so big sometimes because there was a sense of a community rolling around the United States. Like there's a bunch of guys who like, we're going to have fun tonight, even if you kids aren't. So
yeah,
here we go.
And were those tours like fairly successful, or what was it like back then?
Yes, some of them were really successful. Some of them, by financial reasons, you would say they weren't, or there might be only way less kids coming out to this one show than the next. But you have good days that balance that out. I just go back and look at how much fun we had, and it made people gravitate to all of us. So I think that's what happened, because I would rather play a show for 50 or 100 kids that are flipping out versus 500 kids that are just staring at you.
Oh, yeah,
sure. So we worked. I think that sense of community made it almost every night. Like, I had fun. I can't really think of too many shows where I was look back and I was like, can this show just be over, please?
Yeah.
So, and also we had a mentality. We talk about it all the time on the road, being like, it's not their fault. Say 10 kids came and they all paid money to see you. They didn't know there was only going to be 10 kids, and they paid the right amount that they were told to.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it.
We would be like, well, we're going to do our best we can with those kids. You know what I mean? So, and not really be like, I didn't ever want them to feel like, man, this band's a bunch of jerks because they weren't fun live. That's what they would have taken from that. They would have not have known. I understand because no one's here. They would have just seen people have bad attitudes probably. So we just would always remind ourselves of being like, just to have fun. And, there was times where some of our opportunities came out of like things I could look back and be like, that show wasn't that awesome. But then a member from another band was in town. There's a band called Over It that used to be on Lobster Records for a minute.
Yeah, I love them.
And they saw us and they said, I love what you guys are doing. We played for a very small amount of kids in Fairfax. And then they called back and they said, would you guys come up on your next tour? And we booked with them to play like, I can't remember where we played. It was like a gym or something, but there was like 700 kids there.
Wow.
But if we would have been jerks in front of like a low amount of people, that wouldn't possibly not have happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's how you grew back then, right? It's like, we're doing this regardless. We're playing, 100 shows or whatever. And so if it's good, awesome. If it's not, well, it's still what we want to be doing, and it's still exposure. And like you said, those kids still have a right to see a good band play. Like, it's not their fault. So, but yeah, I would love to hear kind of what influenced your guys' sound, because even as I go back and listen, you guys had such a unique sound for that era, because it was, skate punk, but also influences of metal and melodic hardcore. And so I love that, when I was just listening to Kill the Messenger today and just really, really loving all the different kind of influences. A song would come on and I was like, oh, I wonder kind of what influenced this, or so what were like, was it just that all you guys had different influences, or you just kind of wrote whatever sounded good, or what was the thought behind that?
Yeah. One thing, so as far as the influences is that I can look back and think that, our guitarist Aaron loved all different kind of metal bands and the Christian scene stuff like Zao or like non-Christian, maybe like Evergreen Terrace or something like that.
Yeah.
And then you've got EC, the drummer, liked No Effects a lot, but he also liked Deftones. So there's something in there. I like, really liked the more of the Fat records, like your Lagwagon, and Strung Out, No Use for a Name kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And John Walker liked the same, but he also liked Christina Aguilera as well. So it's like, there was just when we wrote, we never were like, sometimes we'd be like, oh, the part that sounds kind of like, Kill Switch Engage, but then when it goes into like the Blink-182-ish part that ended up with like the Christina Aguilera, part at the end there, like, yeah, that song, so when you're writing a song. So it's like, we just never cared to have a format that we were trying to duplicate. We were just having fun and just writing interesting parts. Because one thing is that there's a lot of straightforward melodic stuff, but then we'd hit some really technical parts sometimes. Like a song would have so many different, levels of really fast, the mid pace to a breakdown to really slow for a second, then back. So it was very we wanted it to be like a roller coaster ride. Yeah, and have a lot of dynamic, And I still write music like that with Courage to Your Heart is like more of like a. I got to still write music. So it's, I've never even played a show as Courage to Your Heart, but we record all the time.
Yeah. Oh, so good. Yeah. Well, how did that, maybe that's jumping ahead, but how did that come about? Like you just still needed to write and wanted to do something with a different name or?
Yeah, I had it's kind of a really kind of deep or crazier story there, but I had, part of it had to do with, belief stuff and not, I don't know if you've noticed this, but you have a lot of the old school, or to us old school, the kids we grew up around, they were hardcore Christian kids. A lot of them became angry atheists, Yeah. And I don't know, I never went to an angry atheist phase at all. I went to actually much more, a much more deeper phase. Actually, I was like, people are getting mad about something. I understand they feel like maybe they feel duped or they feel tricked or they feel repressed or whatever they're feeling they got mad about. Yeah. But I learned that whenever people feel that way, it's usually because of a misunderstanding of sorts. Yeah. So I got extra curious and started, I guess, going down some sort of rabbit hole of learning about, I would either drive around, listen to punk rock stuff or like psych lectures, like deep, like Carl Jung and like Nietzsche. And I just got into philosophy stuff and but stuff that was definitely, I liked the stuff that was based around Christianity in some way. So that way I could hear like either just the thoughts or the deep stuff that's in the Bible that no one ever thought of. And I started like breaking my mind on purpose, like just wanting to look for stuff. And I felt like I started seeing stuff. I started having thoughts about things I used to think, and then they would morph and I started to see them much more clearer, and realize that, the whole story, especially from a Christian standpoint, is so interesting. It's going to be way more intense than what we think. And then, so I started writing music about, it's really all the songs go together. It's an alternate dimension kind of thing. There's multi dimensions in all the songs. And I start realizing how all the different choices we make, kind of make all these different possible outcomes. So I started writing songs about that, not from a level of regret, but out of a level of curiosity. Yeah. And also started playing with some ideas that were a little taboo growing. If if we would have talked about this stuff back in the day, I think I might have been, kicked out of the Christian scene, because it's not that I was ever saying anything that's wrong. I like what if questions. And I remember I remember talking to that teacher that I told you about, and I came up with that. I was like, well, on the fly, I was like, isn't the most worldly thing the suit, that what I said before. Well, that was like, I realized those were already in my head, those like deeper questions of like playing around with like something doesn't make sense in what we were told. And I realized that everyone's afraid and everybody's terrified, and everybody needs there to be like this. Everybody needs to make sure they go to heaven. They're terrified of the alternate. Right. So I realized that what if most of the stuff we learned growing up was rooted in fear, not. So I went back to, I went back to kind of deal with that. And so I tell people all the time that Courage to Your Heart is my divorce letter to fear.
Yeah.
So and I don't want anybody to get concerned when they're listening to it, because there's songs about definitely certain people dying, and there's songs in there about people getting divorces and stuff like that. There's all kind of really tough subject matters I cover in there, and it's all real. It's influenced by, it's like a one story, but it's all people I know and friends that have influenced it. I just don't name any names. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there's some heavy stuff in there that I just felt like I needed to document at least my thoughts some way, and I just knew how to do it through music. It's very hard writing Courage to Your Heart stuff, because there's so much to say, and you realize how short punk rock songs are.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's all kinds of stuff in there. So there's been a recent kind of thing where I know I've caused some controversies. I've had even old 710 Split fans kind of get upset about some of the stuff I'm saying in there, or even on my Instagram for Courage to Your Heart and stuff like that. There's lots of kind of like lyrical memes that I like to make just from an artistic standpoint.
Yeah.
And I just play around with ideas, and it's just, I'm not afraid to think about anything. So.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. Thanks so much. Yeah, that's powerful stuff. That's really cool to hear that insight. It makes me really excited to go back and re-listen to the album and just kind of listen to the words a bit more. And yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, I had this idea that it was like, what if what if some people are like, man, that's the weird questions. What if, should a Christian be asking these questions? Almost like that's the vibe I get. They don't really say it that way. Right. But that's what the vibe I get from it. I'm like, my whole thing is, at the end of the day, I'm going to believe truth, no matter what it is.
Yeah.
Like, that's bottom line, because I don't get to dictate what true is. True is truth, whether we all think it is or not.
Right.
And I'm okay with it being absolutely nothing that we were taught when we were growing up, all the way to even more than what we were taught. Even more deeper and crazier and bigger. It's like I don't care what the truth is. I'm just curious.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Yeah, there's a lot to that. I mean, we could go down another rabbit hole of that, but yeah. No, thanks for sharing that insight. That's the kind of stuff I love hearing. Right, that I would never know that by just following social media or even going through the lyrics. Like, I might not take that just from my own understanding or whatever. So that's awesome. So what?
Yeah, with real quick with the Courage to Your Heart stuff too, is like it's so, some of it feels a little cryptic. Like I said, you're having to kind of cram like an idea into a song almost, because you're running out of time in a song,
Yeah.
But I use a lot of analogies. Like, there's one really one of my favorite ones, if you want to check out, it's called Shallowed Be Thy Name is the name of it. And that waking up process that I'm talking, that I felt like I've been going through, I documented in that song, but I tell it from the story of, I use the story of Pinocchio in that song about, realizing that you're cutting the strings that bound you, but you're not quite real yet, but you're becoming real. Yeah. And it's about, and I keep saying in the lyrics in that song about going to find the creator that's inside the monster, because that's referring to Geppetto being inside the whale at the end of the story. But I felt this weird feeling that God's buried underneath everything we were told. So it's to go find that. It's like now God needs his own savior. Now Jesus needs us to go find him. And so he once found us. Now it's time for us to go find him.
Yeah.
So that's pretty heavy stuff. So after you listen, I would love to hear your thoughts, because it's a pretty important song for me.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I definitely will. Man. Yeah. So what brought the kind of end of 710 Splits, touring, or like, I know you guys are kind of back now. Did you ever officially break up, or you just kind of stopped touring and took 10 years
we
off,
definitely
or?
officially, we definitely officially broke up. We had a last show and everything. I think what looking back, what really caused kind of like the breakup is, I believe every band eventually gets to, or every person, no matter what phase of your life is, there's some sort of make it or break it thing that happens. And so what happened is that when you realize that community that we were talking about before was starting to not go away, but it was just not as prominent, because we were doing so many, record label showcases. We were looking for the next level of progression. And, you know, looking back, if we wanted to continue, it probably would have been best to change our band name and just do something a little different or something like that. Maybe not. I don't know. We're trying to figure out, because at that phase, what I think was really going on is the record companies were starting to realize the demise that was coming.
Yeah.
So they were signing bands left and right. So you would turn around and all your friends felt like they were getting signed to, you know, like I said before, you know, with Yellow Card and all these different dudes we used to play with, you know, they're going to Capitol. This guy's going to an island. And, you know, we met with Lava. We got to play. We did 3 different label showcases, I think. Or was it 2 or 3? And just a few months at CBGB's.
Wow.
Like, we'd never played CBGB's before in our whole life. And then within 1 year, we played there 3 times.
That's awesome.
Mainly for record label people that were like in the room.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it was just kind of like, I don't know. I just had this feeling. I was like, I just don't know if all of us are going to look good on a poster in some kid's room, you know, like, you know what I mean? Like, or Tiger Beat magazine or something like that. I don't know. I don't know. I think I remember, so in those times when you go tour some of the big bands or play Warped tours, you start experiencing more and more shows where the people are staring at you instead of engaging.
Right.
And I don't know, that you started feeling, is this really what I want to do? And I don't know, might sound cheesy, but I remember I was married. So I came home and the 2 little dogs that we had at the time, they were freaking out. I was gone for a long time on that tour. It was like 6 weeks straight. I came home, they were at the door just freaking out. And I was like, man, I just walked in the door and these things are freaking out for me. And my wife's happy to see me and all this stuff. And it's just like, I'm kind of tired of like convincing people to like me on the road. So I just, you know, it was kind of that. It was just a phase of maybe it was the end of that phase of my life. But again, after doing my company, writing some Courage Your Heart stuff, that people started noticing, oh, somebody from 7 Inch was writing more music. And I noticed how many people were showing up for the Courage Your Heart stuff. So John Walker, the guitar player, moved back to Atlanta, and EC and Aaron's always lived here. And it just kind of was a perfect timing. So we played a reunion show, and we got to Andrew WK was coming back in. He hadn't been here in 10 years. So he asked us to open for him again. We used to do shows with him.
Oh, that's crazy.
And so our first
like?
show back, it was awesome. The reunion show being like, it was on a Monday night too. It was sold out, and the whole, like, half the crowd was our friends, and it was just like everybody singing the songs. And it's an amazing venue in Atlanta they opened up called Terminal West. And this thing has like, dude, it's like laser light show going on. But the cool thing is the guy running the light show was one of our fans back in the day. So he knew all our songs. So he was programming the breakdowns and everything. Like, he knew where all the stops were, and he just loved, he knew our music.
Yeah,
so it's like, I went back and looked at the video. Sometimes when you're on stage with really good production like that, you don't get to see it like everybody else does, because you're looking the other way.
Yeah.
But then you go back and look at the video, and you're like, I got chills. I was like, man, the lasers are firing every single time we go into like this part of the song and this, that, and the other. And you know what I mean? It was just like over the top. It was like silly almost feeling, because I'm used to playing in a hole in the wall with like a couple of can lights on you. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, and it sounded immaculate too. So it was just like, kind of felt like if you're going to come back, I mean, it's like give everybody the best looking and sounding show possible, you know? Right. And then we just wrote those songs too, and just kind of, well, one of them's an actual song we wrote, and the other one's a cover of that Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper song from the movie Shallow.
Oh yeah.
It was like the main song from it, which is funny because it got people on YouTube love that. I was testing from a marketing standpoint. What happens when you just drop like a, you know, I have the ability at Terminus at my company to record. That's how I record all this music. Yeah. So we have a media department. Okay. So I just stay late. and just record. So
that's awesome.
So we just like recorded that really quick, put it out, to see, and then people loved to hear it, and that we put it out that fast too. So
yeah. I just put 710 Split live on YouTube, and all I'm getting is stinking bowling videos.
I know. If you put in band, it's weird because Oh man, probably this is another thing that we probably should have fixed way back in the day because you didn't think about search engines as much as you do nowadays. But some people would spell. We actually know even on our T-shirts we would spell out 710 like the full the letters.
Yeah, right.
And then sometimes 7-10, and then sometimes we had one shirt that had X's like the old school punk style, like 7X. So it's like, guys, like which way is it written? So I think number 7 dash the number 10 split.
Okay, yeah,
then,
some more stuff came up here when I put that in. So yeah, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. So it's all over the place. Like what's happened there? We were thinking search engine optimization back then.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. You just have you still have that outlet, and because like I'm kind of in the same boat. I played in a touring band years ago, and like I just missed that creative outlet, and I just don't have that now. So it's nice to for you to be able to still have that studio space and have the guys available to jam and write with and be creative.
Oh yeah, it's real fun.
So do you guys plan on like still releasing kind of just singles here and there kind of thing?
We're always talking about it. Our drummer is the tour production manager for T-Pain now.
Nice.
So he is like, when are you going to be at home with when is Mr. Payne bringing you back? So we've been trying to convince T-Pain to let us do like let us be his backup band, do like a rock version of his songs or something.
Man, that'd be hilarious.
But yeah, it's really more, getting the time for everybody to get together. EC's the only one with kids. Almost everybody's married. John Walker has a really awesome serious girlfriend, so that's good. But yeah, it's just, and then me and John Walker work so much at Terminus. It's like we're always like, dude, we got to do it. And then it's like we get so slammed, just pulling everybody together.
Right.
We have enough to write more and more and more, so we should just do it. So
yeah, well, it's hard to find the time. Like you said, you're busy with business stuff and trying to prioritize, creative freedom stuff with, making a living and doing something else you're passionate about. So, but I mean, at least it's an option, right? That's
and what's funny, and then when you get in that mode, it's like, let's do it. And then we go in there and do it. It feels so like meditative. If that makes is that the way I say it? Meditative? Yes. You know what I mean? You're like, you're just in your zone and like nothing else matters while you're recording that stuff. And it's just like, it's a great way to clear your mind. So you're like, dude, we should be doing this all the time because I feel like I'm more efficient at work because I get to like have a little mini vacation on a Thursday night recording, is what it feels like.
Right.
So it's like, we just need to do it because you feel so much better after you create.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Wow, man, I feel like I could just keep going and keep asking questions, but we're going to wrap it up here. I'd love to hear your top 3 bands or albums kind of in wrapping up here.
Sure. Is this of all time? Is this new?
Let's do a top 3 of all time and a current top 3 because I always like to see kind of where people came from and what they're into now.
Sure. I would say for me, top 3 of all time would be Strung Out, Twisted by Design. Would be my number 1.
Yeah.
I would put Counting Crows, August and Everything After nestled in there.
Interesting.
Yep. And then, if I got to add another one to it, what's it going to be? I'm probably going to go
Petra.
God, I probably should. I need to go back. Man, that stuff's probably on. I haven't listened to that in so long. Maybe I need to go listen to it and come back and be like, yep, it's definitely Petra. No, I think, gosh, man, I love the Let's Talk About Feelings by Lagwagon. I love that album a whole lot. But yeah, and Thrice Artist from the Ambulance, like that's a good one. So it's like that's the problem with having the all time stuff because they shift, but a little bit, left and right.
Yeah,
but
sure.
I would say definitely there's reasons for those top 2 just because of nostalgia reasons. But the third one is really hard for me to pin down for sure. But I would go ahead and just say Let's Talk About Feelings for Lagwagon because I love it so much.
Yeah, and how about some current favorites?
Current favorites. See, that's where it gets weird because I'm like here's a weird, interesting thing when I'm listening. By the way, I'll throw a little caveat in there. When I'm writing stuff, I'm listening to so much weird stuff that it's like, and I realize I love stuff that I would have never listened to. Like back when I was doing Cures Your Heart, I went through this like a 3 days where I listened to nothing but Michael Bolton.
Wow.
Like, you know what I mean? But it helped me understand how to do certain like different kind of melodies that I was not usually used to doing.
Yeah, well, for sure.
Yeah. Actually, I would go back on that Lagwagon and put right beside Lagwagon. I probably would put, the Homecoming by Craig's Brother right next to that
man.
too, because we toured with them a good bit too. So it was like that was they were one of the first bands that were like, I guess I don't say not a Christian band, but kind of. I guess I'm going to say that they kind of like let me see. Oh, cool! The non-Christian kids will like us too if we're not on a Christian label. You know what I mean? Because we were like. Not all of our songs were really. Most of our songs weren't like hard, like definitely Christian songs. Like we were just, writing what we want to write. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Anyways, so current, God, man, I've been listening to. There's an album called, I think, Carrie and Lowell by Sufjan Stevens, which is Cat Stevens' son. It's all like mainly acoustic kind of stuff. I don't know. I've been listening to that a whole lot just because it's so weird and interesting to me. But definitely that one there. And God, man, I still go back and listen to, I'll just put, I'll say every other Yellow Card album because I have my theory on you. We have this running Yellow Card joke where you put out, what is it? Ocean Avenue, whatever that was on that album. And then they put out the next one where you're like, what are you guys doing? This doesn't sound like Yellow Card. They came back and did, the other one, just back and forth. They would sound like Yellow Card and then go back.
I totally know what you mean.
So start with Ocean Avenue and then back and forth between every album after that. I like all the Ocean Avenue side ones, if you will.
Yeah, I'm the same with you.
Yeah, so I love that band still to this day. They're great. And then I guess, so we'll just lump them all together as a catalog, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then, I've been listening to a lot of Gin Blossoms. I don't. No, I'll change this one. I have been listening to that. At the Midnight, they're a retro wave or synth wave band that are actually all dudes actually playing instruments.
Oh, okay.
So they're not like just playing a Mac and everybody just doing their thing. They actually, if you're hitting an instrument, there's might be digital, but there's somebody playing it.
Yeah, I think I have that. What's that album called?
They got a couple of them. The newest one is either called Nocturnal or something like that. Maybe that's not the right one, but they're called The Midnight. Also a band called Gunship. That sounds really cool.
Okay.
Like them. So, yeah. So I'm like, one thing I'm noticing real quick about that synth or the retro wave stuff that's going on right now with that specific style. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but you know what I'm talking about when you say like, if I say like a Fat Records band, you kind of know what the feeling I'm talking about, or that at least that wave of Tooth and Nail with like Value Pack, Goatee Hook, MXPX, you kind of know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
This is the first time in a long time that I felt like there's a weird niche-y specific thing. Because if you go look up this stuff, you might find tons and tons of just DJs, right?
Yeah.
But there's this group that's going on right now in that scene that's all playing the actual instruments. All the lyrics are serious. They actually sound like they could be like folk songs if they weren't electronic. Like they're really, really meaningful lyrics. So there's something interesting going on that is catching my attention. So I'm just curious if it's going to be like, is this new like digital vibe that's going to make kids feel like we felt about Fat Records and stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you listen to the band Tycho at all?
Yeah, I have. I've heard. Don't know the songs off my head, but I've seen them pop up, and I know I've listened to their stuff before.
Like I know it's not really synth wave; it's a bit more kind of that instrumental electronic. They do have some singing, but they play all their instruments too. So they just came to mind.
But man, all this, I've got a playlist I made on Spotify so I can keep up with this stuff. But the names of these bands are so hilarious. Like if you're just to get into it, listen to like I said, there's Gunship, The Midnight, you got the Bad Dreamers, you got Time Cop 1982.
Yeah.
No, Time Cop 1983. You got Prism, Wolf Club.
Yeah,
so it's just like
I got this Wolf Club Frontiers album here on my iTunes.
Yeah. Yeah, that one's the new one in Frontiers, really cool too. So I don't know, I'm kind of like liking this stuff, man. And I'm like, usually that's not what I would like. Usually, I didn't never think that. Like I would usually, oh, that's cool. Somebody's like doing a Drive soundtrack with Ryan Gosling. I don't know if you ever seen that movie, but I was like, cool, everything feels 80s, you know what I mean? And those kind of like retro movies, but this one actually feels like people are writing songs.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of paying attention and digging it a little bit, man. So, but yeah. But anyways, man, I do appreciate you having me on, man. It means a lot to have this conversation. Anytime you want to have another round, man, I'll talk to you about anything.
Yeah, no, I love that. I would absolutely love to do that. Where can if people want to check out either Courage to Your Heart or 710 Split or any of that kind of stuff? Where can they find you?
Yeah, well, on all the that's one cool thing is I used some of my connections from back in the day and got distribution for all the stuff I'm doing. So on anywhere where you can download or stream any kind of music, you can hear the 710. You can hear the New School Records 710 Split stuff,
right?
And the 2 new songs on like everywhere that's streaming. If I'm not mistaken, somebody at Screaming Giant went and uploaded on SoundCloud the old 710 Split stuff, so you can go there to hear like the old Screaming Giant stuff there.
I think it's on Bandcamp too. That's where I got it.
That might be where it's at, actually. You might be right about that. Yeah, and then Courage to Your Heart's pretty much everywhere. I got the Courage to Your Heart full length. There's a Tom Petty cover up there on Spotify. Yeah, you can check that as a Courage to Your Heart song. And then I've got a new EP we're almost done recording right now, so I'll probably put that out after the first of the year.